The team to beat in the SEC has been defined. The question, are they the best team in the SEC? Best team in the Big Ten might well reside in Bloomington, Indiana. Are they for real? Or better question, do you believe? This is the College Game Day podcast for Monday, October 28th. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Ryan McGee here, reminding you that we hope you never miss a single episode. If you would download the podcast wherever you prefer to get your podcast, we would be most appreciative, but better yet, subscribe and never miss a single episode of the podcast. One of the things that struck me while we were in Bloomington, Indiana for College Game Day this weekend, in this era where people say that the relationship between player and coach isn't what it used to be, or is not as important as it once was because of NIL, transfer portal, that there aren't opportunities to build those bonds. And you will have some who say, well, in this era of professionalism, and that's what it is in college football, where the players are paid, that is less important than it was in the past. And all of those things are reasonable takes and might well be true on some level. But as we start this, I got a chance on Friday to spend more than 2 hours with Lee Corso and a number of his former assistants and some of his former players. And if you get an opportunity to see what player-coach relationships still mean some 45 to 50 years after they occurred, and how deep those bonds are and how meaningful that relationship is between the two, it gives you pause before you diminish the importance. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting we go back to the era where players aren't paid and let's go back to the old days. It's just that I think sometimes we don't fully value what that can mean to a young person's life and what it means when they become old guys. Because there were old guys in that room brought to tears about being able to recount stories of spending time with Lee Corso. And it wasn't just riding into the first game against Illinois on a double-decker bus or having him walk around the field with a giant hammer that he was calling a gopher stomper. It was more about the things that he taught them that have benefited them over their last 45 years of their life. And it's still pretty powerful. And I think it shows you still why we have great significance in protecting the ability to develop that relationship and develop that culture, Pete. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 45 years from now or 20 years from now or whatever, the Indiana Hoosiers are going to come back and rally around Curt Cignetti and have all of these, deep, warm, fuzzy feelings. But when you do have the relationship, even in the moment that I saw exhibited that has lasted for 45 years plus, and you also then see a team on the field where it's come together quickly and there's obviously a culture and a bond on a team, it's pretty powerful.
So I, compliments to you, Rece, read a fantastic old school Sports Illustrated article from November of 1977. It was published the week of my birth, actually, which hit home a little bit. And it was an old school John Underwood, iconic Sports Illustrated writer from that era, profile of Lee Corso. And it was told through the prism of the Big Two in the Big Ten. Does that sound familiar? 4 decades later, right? Michigan, Ohio State against the Little Eight. And Corso was kind of the face of the Little Eight. And I'm going to tweet this out so our pod listeners can go to my Twitter feed and find it. I have not done that yet, which I regret. It was a elite, compelling, super access, like the kind of like 5,000 word bonus piece that made Sports Illustrated great and sort of defined that era when you couldn't see the coaches on Instagram and you couldn't see them on cable news. This was how you got to know the coaches and the people. And it was just a fantastic piece. Now, for as unconventional as Lee Corso was at the time, it's always interesting to see the themes and how they remain the same. And when you see those men, you said, older men, walk up to that stage to honor Lee Corso, like I did watch them all walk by on Saturday, and you read this, it's connection, right? Like, now the connection's like a buzzword, and it can happen on Snapchat now instead of input. Like, connection is real, man. And you felt how Lee Corso valued connection and motivation. He was not a berater, an MFer. He was on the forefront of enthusiasm and motivating through love. And it was powerful to see that motivation through love, walk onto our set on Saturday.
Well, Friday, one thing, Ryan, real quick, reminded me, Pete said something that reminded me of this that I think you'll appreciate too. One of the guys, or two of the guys in there, Jim Gruden, who's John Gruden's father, and John, were both in that luncheon on Friday. Jim coached for Lee, and John was the ball boy. How about this experience at Indiana? John Gruden was the ball boy for Lee Corso and Bob Knight. So he got to be around different perspectives for approaching the job. But I asked a lot of the assistants, I said, okay, we've heard the stories. He's a hilarious guy. He's been an iconic figure on television. What would really set him off? What would really make him go? And Jim just sort of chuckled and said, he goes, a lot of things. He said, and I can tell you this, as one of his assistants, sometimes crap rolls downhill. He said, so somebody had to be blamed. So, LC was a showman and all of this, but shouldn't let it get in the way that he didn't mind wearing folks out if he had to,
What it reminds me is that the great coaches are like great teachers, and how many teachers did you have? But from elementary school all the way through, if you went to college, and you don't love all of them, and not all of them loved you, and you don't remember most of their names, but there's that couple. There's one or two, maybe one, maybe five, but there's the ones that you remember that connected with you, and it's like that with coaches. And you can. I talked about last week, staying on the sideline with all my guys from the 90s from Tennessee, and I can tell you right now, a lot of them don't have a connection with their former coach, but a couple of them really, really do. And sometimes it just hits. And we did something when we did our SEC media day, our talking season specials, Marty and McGee, that we do. And the last year, I purposely asked every coach that came through there. And I mean, all the guys making all the money and all the programs supposedly, transforming the sport and ruining the sport in some people's eyes. And I asked that question about the player-coach relationship. And most of them got emotional talking about it because they worry about it changing as well. And so you just have to roll with it. And I think about the guys that you can tell on the sideline, the ones that have a real connection and the ones that are ivory tower CEO. And I think that the ones that have chosen to go that, ivory tower route are going to regret it, because the reason they got into this at some point, at some level, they all started at a smaller college or as a GA at a big college, and they enjoyed that connection, or they enjoyed that connection as a player. And I think they'll regret if they haven't created an environment where they don't get their course of tribute. They don't get their banquet, at some point, or they don't get the phone calls from player, not about football, but about coach. I'm having trouble in my marriage. Coach, should I take this job? Everyone has their coach. And I think it's important that stays there. And when I talk to coaches, they almost all say it's still important. And the players will tell you, I might not be here very long, but I want to have that connection too. They want to be coached. Most of them want to be coached. And so, hopefully all these young men we're covering now, they'll get to go to their banquet for, insert coach's name here one day.
There may be a big banquet in Bloomington in a few years to celebrate the 2024 Indiana Hoosiers. Curt Cignetti, who obviously Pete's had the great line about him, is it unfailing or unflappable confidence?
Unflappable. Curt Cignetti has an unflappable belief in Curt Cignetti, and he is most assuredly self-assured.
That's just a great line. And few people have ever been described so perfectly. And I say that with admiration. I mean, Curt has some edge. He has some attitude toward him. His team plays with it. And I think going into last Saturday, he was 24-1 in his previous 25 games. The one loss was the weekend that game day came to James Madison. They played App State. The Jonas Brothers were there, 26,000 people for our show, big game, and they lost. And he was acutely aware of that. And, who knows if adjustments to the way you address it and the way you handle that type of thing have that big an impact? Or is it just the fact that you have a whole lot of veteran players who've been through a lot of games and a lot of preparation and seen a lot of things in college football? But Indiana, even with its backup quarterback, who's a super talented guy, just not as experienced and polished as their starter, Curtis Rourke, who's out with a thumb injury, but Taven Jackson plays. He's effective. The defense makes some big plays. Washington came in. I don't know who said it. We got to get to the bottom. I'm telling you, somebody said to Desmond and Herb Street from the Washington staff, I don't know, because the first I'd heard of anyone saying the Washington Huskies aren't here to get Curt Cignetti's autograph was on the pick segment at the end. And Washington, as we walked into the stadium and walked through them, they had an edge. They had come to compete and play, and they did play hard. But Indiana answered the bell and won the game. And it was, I thought it was a very mature, impressive performance. And I understand the schedule hasn't been murderer's row. I understand they might not and don't have the depth of weapons that Ohio State or Oregon or even Penn State have. But you're gonna have to knock them out, Pete. You know, you may beat them, but you're gonna have to do it. They're not gonna roll over and go, oh my gosh, I see the Buckeyes on the side of the helmet, right? If they were to make it to the Big Ten championship game, I see the Duck on the sideline, and they're gonna cower from that. You're gonna have to beat them, and it's really an impressive thing for the Hoosiers.
So, Indiana is an execution monster, right? They don't have like the first pick in the draft. They probably don't have anyone who's going to pick in the first 5-6 rounds of the draft. They don't have this like transformative scheme that's gonna just baffle you and is taking the sport by storm. They are really good. They have a lot of very good college football players. They are really old, and they are not going to flinch, much like the unflappable guy on the sideline. And that is like a vexing puzzle a little bit here. Look, to be 8-0 in college football is really hard. To be 8-0, what was the stat, Rece, at a place that hasn't won 8 games in 50 years?
Yeah, they just matched, Pete, the best start in school history. They started 8-0 in 1967, wound up going to the Rose Bowl, but they wound up losing and tying a game and losing the Rose Bowl, I think, that year. So, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I think it's 1945 or somewhere in there, they might have had an undefeated season of fewer games because of wartime and all of that.
Sure.
Or maybe they had a tie in there or something back in the era of ties. But this is basically it. This is maybe, it depends on where they go to a bowl, whether they make the playoff. I mean, they're going to a bowl, but I mean, what level, whether they're in the playoff. But this is right there. It has matched the best start in school history. And this is right there for the best season in the history of Indiana football, because no one in college football has lost more games than Indiana. That's why I said on the last thing when we were setting up the sound to set the game, it's okay, you say the schedule's soft. This is Indiana. No one's lost more games than them. What do you mean by a soft schedule? Winning games against any schedule, is admirable at Indiana, and they're doing it.
Yeah. You can't criticize the administration for a soft non-conference schedule. They have 100 years of empirical evidence that say that's drastically needed. So
how'd that work? How'd that work when you got aggressive?
Indiana ain't playing nobody.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because I love this season so much, and we're not 2007 yet, but I love this season so much because everything you just said, and now these programs have history though, but there's BYU and there's Pitt, and they've not been awful forever like Indiana has. They have national championships and Heisman trophies and everything else, but everything you guys just said about Indiana. They're old, they don't run the triple eye bone, whatever, they're running regular football, 2000, but there they sit and they might not have played the most difficult schedule, but you got to beat them if you want to be there. And so that it is what I love so much about this year, because I get a little irritated when the everybody, you mentioned the COVID kids. Everybody maybe rolls their eyes. Oh, are they almost done? I don't care if they're almost done or not. I love seeing it. It's just like when you guys are covering basketball, and when you get to the tournament, who wins? It's old teams with solid backcourt play. And when I look at Indiana and I look at BYU and I look at Pitt, what do I see? I see old teams with solid backcourt play. And so you got to beat them. You do. So it's just the energy you guys experienced was amazing. You know, I have the opportunity to write these essays for the show each week. And last week it was like, hey, man, no offense, we've got no room. And I'm like, is it because of Lee Corso? And they're like, yeah. I go, I'm good. No complaints from me. I'm getting out of the way. You know, I thought that show was magic, and you know, so many of them are, but that one in particular because it's the moment, it's the man, it's the team, all of those things added up. But yeah, it's Indiana football. Who knew? That's Indiana football is, other than Diego Pavia, is the most 2024 thing that we've had this year.
Along with Indiana's futility through the years, one could also say that maybe the greatest underachiever in college football for the last, 80, 90 years, the Aggies of Texas A&M. Texas A&M is now 5-0 in a conference for the first time since they were in the Big 12. They've never done it in the SEC. Texas A&M, for perhaps the most loyal alumni base on the face of the earth, for the most tightly woven group of fans who know all of the hand signals to each other. They know all of what, whoop, howdy, gig 'em, good bull, all of that stuff. They know what all of it means. Everybody does. And yet, they haven't won a national championship since 1939. Their last conference title was in 1998, or at least, let me clarify, their last conference title, and conferences still exist, anyway, was in 1998 in the Big 12. They do have some back in the old days, some leagues that
Brandon
around
Stewart.
anymore. Yeah, exactly. Brandon Stewart knocking off Kansas State, knocking them out of the national championship game. And yet, after that first weekend when Texas A&M played Notre Dame, it looked like, okay, they played hard. They played tough. Going to take Mike Elko a little while. Apparently, a little while has arrived. Now, this will probably not be what Aggies would refer to as good bull, but I believe it's not bull. It's the truth. Texas A&M is not the best team in the SEC. They're also not the second best team in the SEC, but they are the team to beat in the SEC because they're sitting on top of the standings. 5-0 record. Everything in the schedule is set up nicely for them. Their biggest, most difficult games have been and will be at home. And man, did they come through against LSU. And Pete, I think one of the most fascinating things was the quarterback change. The quarterback change from Conner Weigman to Marcel Reed. Quarterback changes always grab our attention. But the deftness with which Elko has navigated a couple of quarterback maneuvers, going back to Weigman, when a lot of people on our set, a lot of us watching the Aggies, saying, I don't know why he's not going to stick with Marcel Reed. Elko gets it out there. He's still growing, maybe not playing quite as well as you guys think on the surface. Weigman comes in, balls. All of a sudden, Weigman's struggling. LSU has complete control of the game. Now, LSU helped them, and we'll get to that in a minute. But they have complete control of the game, and he goes back. And Reed goes off. It's been a masterclass in navigating the waters, Pete.
It really has. And I remember pretty vividly. We were at Cal the morning that we reported it was going to be a game time decision for Weigman finally coming back to that shoulder. And Marcel Reed had played so well against Florida that I think that obscured the fact that they had struggled on offense the next two games. Remember, they barely beat Bowling Green. They beat them 26-20. And then we're in a mud fight with Arkansas at 21-17. So for Elko to pull the trigger after halftime there, I just thought was remarkable because LSU simply did not look ready for Marcel Reed. I mean, I don't think they ran any I don't think they went and invented an offense at halftime, but I just don't think they were ready for a running quarterback. And it showed right from his first snap when he ran into the end zone. Even at that point, Rece was that for a spark, or was that to roll? You know, because sometimes, remember they had the field position. I think that was after the first horrific Nussmeier interception. Correct? That was the one, over the middle that got returned to the 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
And man, like what an adjustment. They simply couldn't stop him. No, Mike Elko is a poker player. When he played at Penn and when he coached at some places in the Northeast, like Hofstra, he would go and like play in like underground poker tournaments. And he has made all the right all-in calls so far this year. And these are not easy, right? Like you go all in the wrong time here and you could end up, broke, but he's kept his team. He's kept I think he has two good quarterbacks and no great ones, right? It seems like it's pretty simple analysis there. But he has certainly figured that out. And I think Blake Baker's done an excellent job with LSU's defense this year, considering the personnel, and they just weren't ready for that.
Yeah, and props to Colin Klein, who's handled these quarterbacks. And we were at the Missouri game just a few weeks ago. I saw A&M against Florida like week 3, and then saw them against Missouri a month later, and it was like two different football teams. Like, we always joke about it's okay to get better as the year goes on. And that team has gotten so much better. But Colin Klein, which by the way, complete side note, I never throw anything away, right? And just I think a couple weeks ago, I found a box of the Colin Klein for Heisman, Kansas State Band-Aids. Remember that? That was the Colin Klein Heisman campaign was the
Yes.
Band-Aids, because he was always getting hurt because he ran the ball, whatever. But
I tried to use one last summer, Ryan. I kid you not, it had lost all of its adhesive qualities, so I threw them away after that.
Okay, full disclosure, so did I, because I was looking for a Band-Aid, but to my wife's chagrin, I throw nothing away, and that's the proof. I told Colin that story, but I give credit to those guys because. And you mentioned Penn. It's just a reminder of how smart Mike Elko is. And watching that team evolve and watching them, they don't question his decisions. There's not any mutiny issues there. And that's certainly a new, pleasant environment at Texas A&M, which is very used to. And by the way, Rece, I still make the A&M fans so mad because I think I've said on the pod before, 1939, #1 movie at the box office, Gone with the Wind. And I always say that on TV, and A&M fans get so angry, but it's also a fact. And what is also a fact is that E. King Gill still has not played a down of football. He's still standing there. I grew up thinking he won the Cotton Bowl, and it wasn't the Cotton Bowl, and he never played. But other than that, but it kind of sums up A&M to me. And so that fan base deserves something. And if this were the team that delivered that, it would be odd. But I'll say this too: we were talking about the craziness of 2024. The Texas game could be the biggest game on the schedule this year for everyone. They still have to go to Williams-Brice on Saturday. And South Carolina very quietly, it depends on which South Carolina shows up, but South Carolina, that's not an easy out. And so it would be very 2024, wouldn't it, if the Gamecocks, who have not been able to get out of their own way a couple times, ended up, screwing all this up for A&M.
It's a huge trap. I mean, because of the havoc that those defensive ends particularly can wreak, they're also good in the back end. So if South Carolina can do that, I think it'll almost certainly be because of turnovers, mistakes forced by their defense, either scoring or setting up a short field. And that's going to be one of the fascinating games of Saturday. Obviously, Ohio State, Penn State's going to be the lead. But Pete, before we leave this A&M story, which is a terrific one and good for the Aggies, they're enjoying themselves. And Ryan, I want to take a little heat off of you before I read this quote so that I'll let them get mad at me a little bit. And they all know I have great affection for them, and I like to get down there and saw Varsity's horns off with them. And
it's awesome.
I sing the Aggie War Hymn. I think it's a very catchy tune. But you referenced the Gone with the Wind being #1 the last time they won the national championship. Typically, Gone with the Wind is what the Aggies' championship hopes are by the time November comes. And now it's changed. So anyway,
thank you. You're a great
now
friend.
They can get on me.
A better friend than you were 30 seconds ago. So thank you.
Hey, Pete, have you gotten to the bottom? Our friend Andy Staples did a little deep dive, and I'm not sure he came up with an answer yet about who exactly Mike Elko was aiming at with the post-game shade of, quote, this is a real program. It's not fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody. This is a real program. end quote.
And this is a real program. It's not fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody. This is a real program. And for all the recruits out there, this is a real place. And if you want to be really good at football, this is a really good place to be.
Now, this is vintage Elko, but there are a number of targets. So I'm gonna lay out the potential targets, and you tell me what you've been able to ascertain. The most obvious target is Jimbo Fisher, because Jimbo, I tell you right now, the best one we ever had. Jimbo speaks at a quick cadence. Could be, and he's also the former coach, and things didn't go as well as the Aggies had hoped. Could be Jimbo. Also, you look across the sideline, A&M's going to recruit against LSU a lot. And, and BK, and I say this with admiration because I consider I'm very friendly with Brian Kelly. He is a politician in a good way, in the good way, in that he can make people feel comfortable.
He actually worked in politics.
Yes, he did. Yeah, we're on the Gary Hart campaign, I think, way back in the day. And for our younger listeners, just Google Gary Hart. There was all types of malfeasance back then that was a big deal that wouldn't be a big deal now.
That's true.
The perfect summation. Yeah,
it's true. So he worked for him, but the low key target could have also been Steve Sarkisian, because now you're back in the conference with Texas. You're always fighting against Texas, and I don't know that Sark fits the mold of what he said, but for all of these 100 years that we've been talking about of A&M football, everything is in some way, shape, form, or fashion aimed at Texas. Texas A&M left the Big 12 to go to the SEC because of Texas. They didn't want Texas to come in because they don't like Texas. So that's a possibility too. So Pete, I know we didn't give you a lot of time to dig into this, and it's not on the top of your to-do list. What exactly have you been able to ascertain about the target of the Mike Elko quote?
So the target of the Mike Elko
quote, I was told reliably, were Jordan Carter, Aaron Gregory, and Samu Moala. Those are the 3 4-stars who committed to Texas A&M yesterday. Mike Elko had no target. The predecessor to the quote that went viral was basically like directed at recruits. I think it's the way we talk to the young people and the things we talk about, the messaging, how we bring really good people into the building. We talk about doing things together. We talk about culture, and everyone talks about it. We go out and live it every day. We back up our actions. We're honest and we're open. And I was told that fast-talking politician, which opened doors, was really just like a euphemism. Now, I don't think Mike Elko's taken one shot at Jimbo Fisher since he took over. Not that
he worked for him, and I'm not aware of any bad blood between the two. So that would have been a little surprising to me.
And he worked for Brian Kelly. So it would be, I just think he got going a little bit because they had a bajillion recruits in town and people kind of took it and went with it a little bit. I don't think I think the fast talking thing was like a euphemism just for like a politician and not actually like a literal fast talker. I know that's like not nearly as fun as SEC coach target practice, but that's how it was translated to me reliably. And I will say this about A&M recruiting.
They're ruining my day. You know that, right?
Yeah, everybody's. Come on, Pete.
They have finished second a lot on big targets at big positions. Look, if you're Texas A&M and you want to beat the teams you need to beat, you need to land top guys, and they've been in top 3s, and they've just kind of been the bridesmaid. And there's some optimism that this weekend might be a little bit of a tipping point for them to say, hey, we can do this. Now, I will say this. I was flipping, and I had the 4-box up late Saturday. Kyle Field looked electric. Amazing. Like it looked a lot like a teeming monster, as that place can be when A&M's going. So that is the actual translation of the Mike Elko quote.
Yeah, he did go to Penn. We said it. I mean, he's a smart guy.
If he were really smart, he could have gotten into Princeton. But proceed. What have you got?
He's not petty either. Like, that's just not his. Yeah. He's not like thin-skinned. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
No, but I'm just saying it's not his style. But it is. But we appreciate the clarification. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I enjoyed it.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I had a duck cover me with silly string because I reported one of their like defensive ends were injured. So I've been taking the heat for the truth this year,
Ryan. Yeah.
Well, that's what we expect from you, Pete. We need the truth. No matter, even if it gets in the way of a good story, which violates every tenet that Lee Corso has tried to teach you over the last few years. Yeah. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story, sweetheart. Yeah. That brings us to best in game for me, guys. Best in the game from this past week was Marcel Reed, because if he doesn't come in and make those big plays running on the cusp of catastrophic decision making by Garrett Nussmeier, I'm not sure A&M comes back to win the game. I'm not sure they set off Kyle Field the way they did, because as I watched the game prior to those changes and the turnovers, I felt like LSU they maybe hadn't pulled away because they'd had some miscues, in special teams, but they felt as if they were in control of the game. And A&M was able to flip it largely with the quarterback change. And because of that, I think Marcel Reed, best in the game for this week. I was looking at some of the Corso reaction online, and I realized that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that my evaluation of the Big 12 being wide, not deep, is now suddenly has angered Big 12 fans. So first of all, I don't care. Secondly, let me clarify exactly what I mean by that. I don't mean that there aren't good teams. What I mean is that they're all pretty good. I don't see a national championship contender in there. That's all I mean by it. Or one that I truly believe could win quarterfinal, semifinal championship game. I don't even really see one that I think could win quarterfinal, semifinal. Do I see one who could knock off one of those teams? Absolutely. See a couple of them, maybe more than that. But I think what illustrated the Big 12 to me was the fact that BYU, undefeated, went to UCF on a 4-game losing streak with a losing record, and somehow BYU was an underdog. BYU's performance against UCF, talented team, not playing to its potential, hence the reason that they were favored. BYU went in there and dropped an elbow on their head and said, enough of this. BYU, Iowa State, taking control of the Big 12 with Kansas State and Colorado, frankly, sitting there hoping they slip up and there's some kind of little avenue through a tiebreaker to get into the championship game. I think it's a really good league, and we've said from the preseason it would be the most entertaining league, and I think that has come to fruition, albeit with teams that we didn't expect to be there. We thought Utah and Oklahoma State would be in the middle of this, and they're not, and they've been replaced largely. I think we thought Iowa State would be there, but they've been replaced by BYU, Colorado, Kansas State, and certainly I expected Kansas to be there. And I'll make a prediction for next year. This will infuriate Kansas State fans. Look at the recent history of the Big 12. All the teams that win the one-score close games one year lose them the next, and vice versa. Last year, Oklahoma State won a boatload of close games, got to the championship game. The year before, TCU won a truckload of close games and went all the way to the national championship game. I picked Kansas, worst pick in the history of ball, to go to the playoff. But
I picked Utah. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, but Kansas has lost every close game imaginable. So next year you're looking for a dark horse pick, Kansas. Now they're just a horse that's on the verge of being put out to pasture for this season. But it's a fun league. And BYU and BYU and Iowa State fall into that category like Indiana. They're probably not as talented as some of the teams they would meet in the playoffs should they get there. But you're going to have to beat them. They're older. They're going to execute both those teams. And, Rocco Beck's not older, but he plays as if he is. Mm-hmm. And Jake Retzloff is just getting better. And BYU's been sensational. So, Big 12 has been fun, and I think we have established the pecking order right now, front runners, with a couple sitting there lurking, hoping they can find a way in.
Did you see the tweet from John Wilner
on Saturday night? Who does a great job covering West Coast football for the Bay Area News Group. It said, top 5 Big 12 preseason media poll. Number 1, Utah, 1-4 in the league. Number 2, K-State, 4-1. Number 3, Oklahoma State, 0-5. Number 4, Kansas, 1-4. Number 5, Arizona, 1-4. That was not a very good media poll. Not the media's best poll.
Yeah. Other than that, covering the Big 12 is the spaghetti pile of college football, and they kind of replace the ACC for I have no idea what's going to happen. and does like the Kansas State game is, to me, sums up the entire conference this year, because that was crazy entertaining, and it's a team that's fighting for a conference title, and it's a team that is trying to get out of its own way. And oh, by the way, I love the bowl season thing where the teams now, like, they're all in on wearing the T-shirts, like we're qualifying for a bowl. And Colorado Buffaloes, y'all, got their T-shirts on, going bowling. No matter what happens from here on, they will be somewhere during the holidays.
Did you see Deion's interview in game with Quint Kesting? I think Quint was on that game. I'm pretty sure he was.
I did.
Hilarious. I mean, you want to talk about mastering the moment.
Yep.
I think it was the end of the third quarter, and Quint said something to the effect of Deion about, Miss Peggy, their famed elderly fan who's wanted to go to a bowl game, and Quint, kind of captured the moment and said, hey, you're, 1 quarter away from getting Miss Peggy to a bowl game, just like she wanted. And Deion basically said, no. He goes, yeah, but Miss Peggy's going to be ready to trade up. She's expecting more now. And he said, we are too. It was a great moment, a reminder that not only is Deion doing a nice job coaching the team, still handles that microphone pretty well too.
And he called her, and the video, him calling her from the locker room, that was amazing.
We're gonna put a call into her to let her know she's going to a bowl game.
Oh my God, I am so happy. Thank you. My God, what a turnaround you've done for us.
What we've done, Peggy, first and foremost, we love you, we appreciate you, and we want to thank you, and we want to congratulate you to being able to go to a bowl game this year.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for that.
Listen, say what y'all want. I was mad because I went out there to interview him this year, and he never showed up, but the players did, and it was great. But say what you want, but they're sitting top 25 and they're going bowling. And so that'll make it, much like the election we were just talking about, a lot of people are going to really like that, and a lot of people are going to be really mad about that. And I'm here to watch everybody be happy and uncomfortable all at once.
Not really sure why. I mean, look, everybody has favorite players or favorite coaches or whatever, and sometimes you can't really explain why. You just sort of like a player or coach, or you don't. Kind of having a hard time figuring out exactly why you wouldn't be pretty happy for them. Colorado's lost a lot. I mean, Deion is, I know, but I think what I'm saying is, what is it that you don't like? You know, I mean, look, I know that some people get a kick out of any celebrity who is, who has some swagger, some personality to them, who's a little, what is the word I'm looking for? He's kind of effervescent, kind of out there, very self-assured. I get it that some people don't like that, but I mean, this is a fun story. You got a two-way player in Travis Hunter, who, I think has to be on everybody's top three, in one of the positions, 1, 2, or 3, and for the Heisman Trophy. You got the guy who may very well be the first quarterback taken in the draft. And okay, so they talk a little junk, after the win. So they point, to their wrist because of their watches. I mean, it's overall it's fun. I think it's fine. I mean, and if you don't like it, that's fine too, because everybody's, some people, like different flavors of ice cream, So
it's the Steve Spurrier rule. If he's your coach, correct, you love him. If he's not your coach, you hate him. And that's what it is. And I'll say this, when I went out there last year, and I did talk to Deion, I said, listen, I was there at Clemson when you were waiting on Clemson to come down the hill, as a defensive back at Florida State, and just stood at the bottom of the hill like, I'm not impressed. And I said, they booed you. He said, I'm pretty sure they booed me like in the delivery room after I was born. He goes, that's just the gig. Yeah. I'm like, so he doesn't care. But anyhow, they're going bowling. I think that's, no matter what happens from here on out, they'll be in the postseason, and I'm all about it.
Hey, let's hit a couple of quick things, boys, here at the end. What about the performance from Texas against Vanderbilt? Give Vanderbilt its flowers. They fought, they had a chance, they stayed in the game. But Texas, I brought it up on Game Day Saturday, had a history the last few years of, now you could argue they did the same thing they've been doing, and a team that they probably should have overwhelmed from a talent standpoint. They weren't able to, but found a way to win the game. But I think after that disappointment and the physical nature of playing Georgia one week and having to play football again against anybody the next week can be challenging. What'd you think of Texas' performance on Saturday and pulling out that win?
I thought Ewers looked pretty sharp.
There was two batted balls that got intercepted, but he just felt like he was back in a groove again, which we really hadn't seen in a while. So I took that as a positive sign. No Isaiah Bond. They moved the ball kind of at will. And look, they got Pavia. There was a onside kick hopping in the air with 45 seconds left, which would have given Vanderbilt a chance. Texas obviously recovered it. Excuse me. I thought Texas looked fine considering everything. Again, it was a top 25 game, right? So like they went there and they figured out a way to win. And look, Vandy is not an easy out anymore, and we just have to like recalibrate our minds to that.
Yeah,
Ryan, you could take some time.
I agree with you. And Ryan, you were at Alabama for homecoming against Missouri. The game is a little bit under the radar because of the recent play of both teams. You had some interesting vibe you felt like around Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, it was homecoming. Our crowd, quite frankly, was awful, for Marty McGee and SEC Nation. And as you guys know, when the Tuscaloosa crowd wants to be there, they can be there. But it was from the time we got there, first got on campus earlier in the week, it just was, I called it uneasily enthusiastic, which is they're not real sure what to do with themselves, the fan base. They want to support the team. I think they like Kalen DeBoer, but they don't want to like him because they have 2 losses for the first time in a million years or whatever, since the gentleman who's on y'all's set, did it a long time ago. And we had DeBoer on Marty McGee, and the crowd kind of followed him in, and they were excited to see him. But, it's a weird mix right now. And quite frankly, it's just a spoiled, rotten fan base. They have 2 losses. They're 11 points away from being undefeated. And, they lost to a team that we all know now is really good. Texas just found that out. And a team that is a top 5 football team in Tennessee. And so on the road. And so it's, they've got issues. They have a 2-person offense. Jalen Milroe, the good news is he didn't throw an interception for the first time in over a month. He ran for 1. And they had 3, they took down 3 interceptions. They took 3 away from Missouri, which is good. So those are all positive steps. But Milroe still, he was generic against a good Missouri defense, but there's still issues. But they still have a chance for a really good year, and a year when they lost so much of the roster, and a year when they're trying to install a completely different offense. A lot of things are going on. It just was weird. It just was a group of people that wanted to enjoy homecoming, but Rece, they're not used to being in this position as November rolls in, and it's an interesting sociology experiment because it's just a group of spoiled, rotten fans, and good for them.
I'll tell you who's not spoiled, fans. The Duke fan base is not spoiled, but they are accustomed getting their heart broken. And last Saturday night, because it was my Superdog pick, and kudos to them for coming through, at least getting the cover, but they didn't get the outright win, and they should have. And it was because of this was an awful great game because SMU turned it over 6 times. Duke had a multitude of various mistakes and kicking game woes, and then at the end of regulation, before SMU won in overtime, Duke had a chance with a short field goal to win the game. And a man called Jafari Harvey from SMU basically did a standing broad jump, high jump over the Duke offensive line and blocked what would have been the game-winning field goal. No foul, because he was in a stationary position within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. And I was reliably told by the head of officials that when they wrote the rule, they never anticipated having a defensive lineman that could basically stand and explode into the air over the line, land, and block it. It was a remarkably it was remarkably athletic play. It was a remarkably athletic play that saved the game. And then, they swapped touchdowns. Duke went for 2, and they got criticized. It was the right call. They just didn't get the 2. Tried to win the game right there, which I'm always for.
Kick is blocked. And SMU falls on it, and we're going to overtime.
And I'm always for you listening to the College Game Day podcast. Listen wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or subscribe and never miss an episode.